Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Pedagogy Podcast. My name is Jacqueline Beckoff and I own a successful music studio in Southern California, as well as defined music teacher. Today I'm here to talk to you about my idea of yearly themes, and I'm super excited to dive into this topic. We're going to talk first about an overview of it, what yearly themes are. We're going to then move on to talking about how you apply it to students. And lastly, we're going to talk about how you can apply it for yourself. Without further ado, let's jump in. So, first of all, this was not something that I came up with on my own. I adapted it from one of my favorite YouTubers, CGP Grey. He put out a video about New Year's resolutions and just how much they suck. And instead, he talked about his idea of a yearly theme. I applied this in my own personal life, and then I decided that I wanted to do it for my studio as well. So a brief overview of CGP Grey's video. I highly suggest you go watch the entire thing. I'll link it in YouTube as well as the show notes for the episode. But a brief overview of this concept is that our life is filled with choices, right? We make hundreds of choices every single day. And the idea of a yearly theme is to focus some of those choices. If we contrast this with a New Year's resolution, New Year's resolutions have a very binary pass or fail state often. For example, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. And then by week 5, the end of January, you've kind of slipped on it and you've missed it a few times. So you've already failed at that resolution that you set for yourself. And that can be very discouraging. And oftentimes it's just easier, well, I'll try again next year. So CGP Grey would suggest that instead of setting a resolution like I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week next year, that you have a year of health or a year of fitness. And that seems much more vague at first. And I suppose it is, right? But the idea is that in your year of fitness, every day you want to try to make decisions that benefit your year of fitness rather than detract from your progress on it. So does that mean that you're going to go to the gym 5 days a week? Maybe. It's probably not going to be every single week, but maybe you're going to try to go to the gym more often, or you're just going to go for a walk one day, or you're going to try to eat better. Those are all things that fit within the idea of the year of fitness. For myself, in my personal life, 2024 was my year of yoga. Behind me, you can see a beautiful habit tracker by one of my other favorite YouTubers. It's called the Everyday Habit Tracker. And it's basically a really fancy gold star chart. But for my goal for myself here this year was I wanted to look back at the end of 2024 and say to myself, yeah, this was my year of yoga. And I can honestly say that as I'm recording this on December 27th, 2024, that 2024 was my year of yoga. I have a daily yoga practice. I spend about 15 to 20 minutes doing yoga most days, and I feel so much better than I did last year. I am getting up there, and I don't feel sore. I'm much more flexible. It's affected my piano practice. I just, in general, I feel better. But if I had set myself a year, a goal of a New Year's resolution, rather, that I'm going to do yoga every day. On the chart behind, and for those of you not listening, I definitely didn't do yoga every day. There was a period in July. I didn't do a whole lot of yoga. In August, I fell off of the wagon. So there were some times where I didn't really make great decisions towards my year of yoga. But I did not fail at yoga this year. And I am going to carry this yoga practice with me through to 2025 and hopefully for the rest of my life. But if we back up here and get back on track here with yearly practice themes for students, let's see how we can apply that to help our students begin to reflect and to make better decisions, right? If we return to our idea of our days being filled with lots of little decisions, this also applies to practice. Within a half an hour practice session, I think it would be fair to say that a 12-year-old could make certainly dozens of practice decisions, maybe even 100 different tiny little practice decisions. Just like the ones we make in our life, most of these decisions are automatic. And that is what we're looking to change. That's what we're looking to change. One of the practice themes that many of my students select is a year of rhythm or a year of tempo. They have some overlap there. But one of the most automatic decisions that pianists make, myself included, and certainly our young students and our adult students, they make an automatic decision about how fast they're going to go. There's no thought put into that. They say, okay, I'm going to practice the first 16 measures, or maybe I'm going to do the whole thing, and then they just start. Sometimes they might even count before they begin, like we teach them to. But that may not really be an active decision. Maybe they always float around 100. Or maybe no matter what tempo they count at before they start, they just kind of go off at the tempo that's appropriate for that piece of music. Maybe it's completely disconnected. So, some of my students that have a year of tempo, over all of 2024, students with that theme have been making decisions during their practice that benefits this theme, right? And this is a wonderful project for your students because it brings focus across an entire year, right? Just like I can look back at 2024 and say, I am way better off with yoga than I was at the end of 2023. I want my students that select tempo as a theme to be able to say, I am way better off at tempo today than I was 365 days ago. Some other themes that are I don't say common, but they're issues that are not uncommon. And as a result, students often select that kind of theme. Year of rhythm. How often do students look at a rhythm and just kind of not even really guess, but they just kind of go off whether they remember about that rhythm, and they don't really necessarily put a great deal of thought into that rhythm. Yeah, I know dotted quarter note, eighth note. Okay, well then why is your eighth note seeming more like a 16th note for this piece? Because you're going off that dotted feeling and you haven't put active thought into that rhythm. So that is another way that you can, really focus that on rhythm, right? Maybe a student that is selecting rhythm as their practice theme for the year, instead of just jumping in, maybe they'll look at different rhythm patterns, figure that out with clapping or tapping, and then go to playing. And, be able to pat themselves on the back and say, I did focus more on rhythm this year. And I feel like rhythmically, my practice has been more productive than it has in the past, right? Now, not every student is able to do this, right? Not all of my students participate in this project, right? Let's talk about the ones that don't participate in this project. Young kids, right? Perhaps kids, I think 11 and below, certainly 10 and below are on the young side to be able to look at themselves, evaluate themselves, and then select a theme. These kinds of questions about what do you think? Because I don't assign themes to my students. Let's make that clear. This is not a me telling them you suck at rhythm. All of next year is going to be focused on rhythm. Because I mean, that obviously I would never say that, but also that just kind of feels bad, right? It feels bad to have your teacher point to you and say, okay, you need to focus on this thing for a year, right? So instead of that, it's them looking and evaluating and thinking about themselves. And that's the point. So a 7-year-old does not necessarily have, most 7-year-olds do not have the self-awareness and the logical reasoning skills, and just they're not mature enough to evaluate, decide, and execute something on that scale. Students that haven't been with me for very long, if I had an adult student, 25 years old, and she just started taking lessons perhaps in October, right? So that's, a few months, 4 months. Things are so crazy for a student that's just started that to try to choose a theme, I think would be very difficult for a student like that. Because, I mean, you're learning so many things, you're going through so many fundamentals, we're shaping your skills at such a degree, and we're starting from such a raw place that it's really kind of tricky to try to focus on a specific area of practice for an entire year, right? But the next year, the next October, when she's been taking lessons for a year and 4 months, she's definitely in a place where she can focus on one of her spots that isn't up to par with the rest of her skills, right? And importantly, this also just gets students to be mindful about their practice, right? It just gets students to think, right? Because if students are just going home and they're like, I have no idea what areas I need to improve on, right? I have no idea what kind of decisions I'm making in my practice. Well, then perhaps a year of mindfulness might be in order for them, and just getting them to sit down and think during their practice. Now, after a student has selected a theme, for example, we'll say year of dynamics. Maybe my student feels like, they are always getting harped on in their lessons about forgetting about their dynamics. Or maybe they feel like that's just one of their weaker spots. Then the next step is for them to make a poster. Just 8.5 by 11 or A4 for our European friends. Just something that will be a reminder for them. In big letters, they're going to draw out year of dynamics. They might decorate it with 2025, mezzo forte. They might put dynamic marks on there, right? Some of them draw pianos. Some of them get really artistic with it. Other people just kind of draw on the thing and just says year of dynamics, 2025. All of it's fine, right? The point of this poster is to serve as a reminder for our students. And then they put that poster up by their piano. If they have an upright piano, maybe they put it on the I'm not sure, the flat part, right? So that they stare at it every single time they are practicing. Or if they have a keyboard, maybe they tape it to the wall. But whatever it is, they're putting that in a place where now every time they practice, they are seeing year of dynamics. And that year of dynamics poster reminds them of the commitment they've made, the commitment they've made to themselves, the commitment they've made to me, that when they practice, they're going to make better decisions regarding dynamics, right? Maybe they do an activity that I call the dynamic palette, kind of like a painter's palette, right? They look at all the dynamic marks in this piece of music and they work out what they want their mezzo forte to sound like, what they want their forte to sound like, what they want their piano to sound like. And then they go through the small sections and they are now focusing on their dynamics, right? So that poster serves as a reminder of their commitment, and that as they are practicing, they're going to make better decisions regarding dynamics. Right? Now, at my student workshops, every month my students have a group workshop where they come together with students around their age group. I have 3 groups, like 10 and below, 10 and maybe 11, depending on the student. But then there's the teens, and then there's the adults. And at the beginning of the 2 older age groups, those are the age groups I usually do this activity with, I go around in a circle, or wherever we are at the table, and I ask them what their yearly theme is and whether or not they've been making good progress with that theme this year. And the students get to know each other. And I've had some students comment during the feedback portion of the performance, the feedback, giving feedback during the performance portion of the workshops, that they're like, I really noticed that your dynamics were just awesome. And I know that you've been focusing on dynamics this year. So that's really great, right? So there's accountability to their students, to themselves, and to me, right? So they're constantly reminded of that theme as the year goes through. Now, the last thing that they do before, the new year commences, is that they record a video for themselves. I have an online platform. It's called Padlet. It used to be called Flipgrid, but Flipgrid shut down, so I moved over to Padlet. And they often record videos as part of their assignments. And every student that has a yearly theme records a video, not for me, not for the other students, but for themselves. Right? So they go back at the end of 2025 and they watch the video that they recorded 12 months earlier. And in that video, they're not only saying what their theme is and what they're going to do to benefit that theme, they're also explaining why they chose that theme, right? So maybe someone says they did memory, the year of memory. So they say, memory has always been something that I dread. And I don't like feeling like that. I don't like feeling bad when we perform from memory. So this year, I'm going to focus on my year of memory. And in order to do that, I'm going to memorize music more than I normally would. I'm going to memorize more pieces, even ones that Miss Jackie doesn't ask me to memorize. And to do that, I'm going to be more deliberate about the kinds of memory I use. I know my favorite kind of memory is just rote memory, just doing it over and over again. But I'm going to try to get into visual and oral memory this year. I'm going to focus on what it looks like and what it sounds like, because I feel like those are 2 areas of my memory that are really underdeveloped, and I want to excel at that. And then that video sits on Padlet for a year, and the next time we have this discussion at the end of 2025, they watch that video back and they then say, yes, memorization is something I am better at today than I was 12 months ago. Or sometimes no, I continued to be kind of intimidated by memorization this year, and I really didn't achieve a marked improvement. But that's very rare because of the monthly check-ins. And of course, I know what their theme is. So we also kind of focus on that in their lessons, right? This is such an important part of a pianist's development. The ability for them to set their own goal, monitor that goal, and then feel accomplished when they achieve the thing that they set out to do, instead of being instructed by me to say, your memorization skills need some work. So next year, we're going to focus on that. right? It's the student who never really knows which chords are which, the year of theory, and they're going to do games on their phone, and they're going to do worksheets. And then, of course, I incorporate it more into their lessons. And by the end of the year, they know which chords we're talking about, right? They know the key signatures. They've improved. And that is such a tremendous feeling for somebody to feel, right? So students ages 12 and up, maybe younger, maybe older, depending on the particular student. And as long as they've been playing for probably about, 9 months, 6 months. It depends on the student. So certainly your students that have been with you for multiple years are perfect for this activity. If you don't have an online thing like Padlet for them to record a video, then you can record a video on your phone and save it and play it back for them in the a year later, right? It doesn't need to be that. You don't even need to do the video. You can just make the poster and make sure that you stay focused on it, right? Write a list of all of the themes that your students have selected and review it before your lessons so that you know what they thought was important for an entire year of focus. Running down just a list of themes that students have selected in the past: year of dynamics, year of articulation, of rhythm, tempo, of repertoire. One student just wanted to learn more. Year of pieces, same thing, different title. Year of music theory, year of memory, year of performance, year of confidence, year of mindfulness, year of consistency, year of practice, year of enjoyment, year of duets, year of composition. There's so many different focuses for a student to take and select the one that is most important for them. Now, the flip side of this is that a teacher, you, dear listener, can select your own theme to focus on. Now, this theme is going to look much different than your students. You're not going to select a musical element. You're going to select a much higher level, and by that I don't necessarily mean more complex, I mean grander in scope, something that you can say affects all of your students. So I also have one of those themes that I choose for myself. And the one for this year that I had selected for myself, for my teaching, was year of composition. And that is because I really enjoy composing and teaching my students to compose. But it can feel difficult at times to work into a lesson, right? It's easy to say, well, this just is not as important as the other things. But for me, I believe very strongly that we should embody the old classical traditions that students should be able to write their own music. And to truly understand something, not only can you read it, you need to be able to write it. You guys know this with music theory. If you ask students to identify a chord, C, E flat, and G, they might be able to do it. C minor, sure. If you ask students to write down a C minor chord, you might find that fewer students are able to accomplish that task. Right. So being able to write something is certainly different from being able to read it. And creating creatively is often seen as the highest level of proficiency with a concept. Now, for me, I have struggled with feeling like, well, recital's approaching. Let's just put composition on the back burner. Or this student is struggling with reading music. Let's just drill it with cards instead of what I believe is much more interesting, incorporating it into a composition activity. But it's challenging, and it takes work as a teacher to incorporate composition into your lessons. So for me, one of the things that I have done this year is all my students do the performance workshop every month with their age group, like we talked about earlier. And they get a chance to do music games. They get a chance to perform and work on performance anxiety. They get a chance to meet other people, do duets, all that stuff. But I created a separate optional add-on for my program this year, which was the composition workshop. It's a half an hour before normal workshops, so the students are already there. And for the students that really enjoy composing, it's a way for them to get focused one-on-one, not one-on-one, but focused time on composition. Every month they share something that they have written. Every month I talk about a composer, I talk about a compositional technique. So every month there's deliberate thought from my end going into this year of composition. And instead of asking myself, am I better at composition at the end of the year? I look at my studio as a whole and I say, is my studio, are my students better off in terms of composition than they were last year? Do they know more about how to compose? Do they know more about composers? Do they express themselves creatively with more confidence? And for me today, yes, the answer is yes. My students today are more confident composers than they were last December. And my studio has a bigger focus. My studio has a bigger focus on composition as a thing. I want to be known as that teacher that teaches not only performers, but also composers. And I think that this year I've taken concrete steps towards accomplishing that. And I'm proud of myself for that. Just like my students that are better off with their rhythm are proud that they've made that progress. I am proud of myself and proud of the emphasis that I've given to composition this year. And that's obviously not the only thing that you can do, right? Some teachers really enjoy, or rather, some teachers recognize the benefit of lesson planning. I recognize the benefit of lesson planning. Do I lesson plan? Not as much as I want to. I lesson plan for workshops because I need to. Otherwise, they'll show up and I'll have nothing to talk about because it's several different students converging and they all need to have something that interests them and that they're all capable of doing. But for my private students, for my private lessons, I don't lesson plan to the extent that I would like to. Lesson planning takes extra time. It takes thought, takes effort. And all of these things are not easy to come by. Time is not easy to come by. Mental energy is not easy to come by. So someone might say, well, I recognize that my students learn so much better when I lesson plan. So for 2025, I'm going to focus on my year of lesson planning. And for them, they're like, I just want to write more lesson plans. I just want to have some activities that I plan ahead of time and I can pull out, or I want to be able to work on more preparation stage learning so that my students learn more easily, right? They feel more better about themselves because I've planted those seeds of knowledge, or whatever it is. They are focusing on lesson planning. And that is their high level concept for 2025. And we don't necessarily need to make a big poster and make it very obvious to our students what we're doing, right? But we would want to have something to remind us. In my studio, there are places that I can put things that I can see that my students cannot see, right? So every time I go to work, every time I teach, I see that I was focusing this year on composition. And I'm staying accountable to myself. And I tried to incorporate more composition. If maybe you feel like your students don't know enough about music history or music theory, and you want to try to incorporate more tidbits of knowledge about the historical context that this music has, you put that on a piece of paper, you put it somewhere that you can see it and they can't see it. And as you're looking through music, you talk a little bit more about the composers. you talk about, well, this is Baroque music. What instrument was this music written for? It wasn't the piano. It was the harpsichord. What does that mean, right? Maybe you try to incorporate more of that into your lesson, right? And when you select this, you should select something that you feel passionate about, that you feel is important, right? You feel this thing is important and you want it to be a bigger part of your definition of what piano lessons is, for your concept of what piano lessons is. And, when your student goes home and parent asks them, what did they talk about? Like, what happened? Maybe they mention, I learned about the harpsichord, right? You want that to be part of what they conceive of piano lessons. So if that's what you believe is important, select that and do some legwork ahead of time. What are things that you can do in the thousands of decisions you make on a monthly basis with all of your students combined, right? It's overwhelming to think about it in that way, but every month you have, 30 students. You see them all 4 times. That is 120 lessons. And you make, 25 decisions on the small side about, which piece do you start with? What do you say about this piece? How do you prepare them to play this one? And do you mention the composer here? Do you talk about that minor chord there, right? You're making thousands of decisions on a monthly basis. And you want to influence those decisions. You want to try to make better decisions in your idea of what you think is important for the year 2025. And that is a powerful thing to be able to do. It's a powerful thing to be able to say, I think this is important. I am going to do this. And then a year from now, you look back and you say, yes, my students know more about history today than they did a year ago. I made that happen. I taught my students about history, something that they didn't know. And they now know a little bit more about who Beethoven was. They know why Haydn was important. And that is a powerful thing. So let's recap this idea here, and then I'll give you what I think is the most important takeaway here. Today we talked about my idea of the of the yearly theme, and how you can give your students the ability to reflect and choose an area of their practice that they want to make better decisions in. And I told you a little bit about some of these different themes: articulations, dynamics, composition, all of these different things, and how they make posters and a video. And every month we check in and they're making decisions that benefit that thing. We also talked about how, as a teacher, you can apply this to your own lessons, right? You can talk more about history. You can give more historical context, or maybe you try to focus more on teaching theory. Maybe you love Nicola Canton's games and you want to have more games in your lessons. So next year is your year of games, and you just download all of her wonderful games and you just go crazy with it. Or you want to incorporate more technology, so a year of technology. Whatever it is, how you as a teacher can go through and change the course of your studio by choosing a theme, so that the thousands of decisions that you make every month are focused towards something, instead of just being automatic decisions that our brain makes and gets you more in the driver's seat rather than being a passenger. I highly encourage you to watch the video by CGP Grey. I'll link it in the description on YouTube and in the show notes on the blog. I highly encourage you to read it. Maybe next year can be your year of yoga as well. Have a happy new year, and I wish you all of the best in 2025.